It's no secret that writing can be lonely work, but does it really have to be? Whether you're full-time, part-time, or just starting out, you'll get insights into the tricks, tips, and production habits of writers from every level of the biz. From best-selling authors to those launching their first novels, you're sure to be in the company of friends as we encourage great writers to divulge and share their secrets.
This is the Great Writers Share podcast with your host, dark urban fantasy author, Holly Line.
Hello and welcome to episode number 78 of the Great Writers Share podcast, a podcast where every week we hijack an hour or so of time from some of the kindest and hardest working writers around today to join us on the show and discuss everything that makes them tick, roar and bounce. My name's Holly Line and it's the 4th of February as of recording. Today I'm talking to Miranda Oh, a chick lit author from Canada. We had a fantastic chat about how her life experiences have influenced her writing, finding the right writing environment and support network, and how podcasting helps her to develop as a speaker and a writer. Before we get into the interview, a quick personal update from me. My novella, The Hidden City, is now available for pre-order, and I'm very much looking forward to starting work on the next book in the series. I've been tinkering with my schedule recently and trying to figure out a better way to balance everything because I got horribly burnt out and taking a week off did not do the trick. So I'm also looking at my sleep cycles and my chronotype and how that all fits together and how I can make the best use of my time that works for me and works for my family situation and everything. So I'm still figuring that out, but yeah, I'm optimistic and hopefully this is going to be the start of a much more productive period for me. I'm looking forward as well to getting back to writing just for fun a little bit because I've been so focused on running my business that I haven't really taken the time to do that. So I'm going to join in with some little challenges and stuff and just let my hair down and just enjoy getting stuck into something that I probably won't even publish, just something that's just for me and that's a bit of fun. My other podcast, Unstoppable Authors, is approaching its 2-year anniversary. I co-host that show with Angeline Trevena, and we are currently scheming and plotting away for what we can do to celebrate our 2-year anniversary of podcasting together. So that's happening, and it would be wonderful if you could join us over at Unstoppable Authors and take a listen. Now then, our question of the week. Last week I asked our patrons, what main emotional response do you want to evoke in your reader? Now, we had some really, really lovely responses over on our Slack channel. Faye, one of our co-hosts, said inspiration and determination. Jen Mitchell said discomfort. I want to take them out of their day-to-day safe place and drop them into a place that makes them feel and experience emotions they don't normally tap into. Brett Jackson says, I want them to feel like they've travelled to another place and feel like they're immersed in the world I've created, full of awe and wonder and, wow, this is real. And our very own Dan Wilcox added, I want to create a human connection. Although I write in horror, every scenario I write needs to bring people into a real human feeling. Fear, love, desperation, passion. I want my readers to feel what happens to a person when all control is gone, and all that's left are the fundamental commonalities of humanity. Deep stuff. So, yeah, I loved all of those responses. Thank you all very much. And now, without any further ado, let's dive into the interview with the one and only Miranda Oh. With me today is Miranda Oh. She's the author of the successful chick lit series Up Tits Out. Author Miranda Oh, a girl of Metis tradition and descent, is your typical girl. She loves the sunset, long walks on the beach, world travels, and when not playing the corporate part, she can be found sipping wine and spending all her hard-earned money on nice shoes. Among her friends and family, Miranda is known to be the storyteller of the group, always recapping crazy life stories and situations. Her personal experiences, emotions, and fantasies are the inspiration for most of her books, so there is a little bit of her in every story. Welcome to the Great Writers Share.
Hi, thanks for having me. I'm very excited to be here.
Excellent. So could you start us off by just telling me a bit about your writing journey so far?
Yeah, for sure. So I've been a writer officially, like a published writer for about 5 years now, and I've published three novels, a full series, and I'm currently working on my next series, which is another 3-book series as well, and it has been a wild ride. I think I said this the other day on an interview. Like, when I say a wild ride, I mean it has been a roller coaster. Like, there has been up moments, there has been down moments, there has been moments where my stomach is doing backflips, but I am excited. And there's moments where my stomach is doing front flips and I'm like, holy, I don't know what's going on. It has been an absolute whirlwind, and lots of learning. Like, you don't ever really stop learning as an author, whether you're learning about whatever you're writing or you're learning about what your readers or your fans are saying about your writing. And so it's a constant growth spectrum that you're kind of balancing on. And I am so excited that I have had the opportunity to not only write one book, but to continue this journey. And I am so honored that, when I do write, people actually want to read my stuff. And so that's really exciting as well. So it has been one giant roller coaster, and I just can't wait to keep going and seeing where it takes me.
Yeah. Have you always enjoyed writing, or is it something you've come to just a bit more recently?
I would say I'd always enjoyed writing. Like, as a child, as a kid, I really enjoyed telling stories. And that class of creative writing was always something that I really enjoyed. Like, I remember writing a story about a crocodile, whatever the crocodile was back in like grade school. I just had so much fun writing about it. And then you kind of fall out of it as a teenager. I was really into sports. So what I did write was a journal. Like, I kept a journal. So I would always just kind of keep notes around whatever was going on in my life at that point. And then when sports was no longer a thing, it was like, okay, are you going to try to go professional, or are you just doing it because your parents encouraged you to stay out of trouble and be busy as a kid? And that was what it was like, here, you're good at it, so let's do it. But then you're not that good to like make it pro. So, that was when work shifted into my life. And when work shifts into your life as a teenager and you're going to school, there was like no time for writing. It was like a very structured, very busy week. And then when I hit college, I knew exactly what I wanted to do. And there was a creative writing story, and I had this story and I wrote it out and I was super proud of it. And I got like an average mark, and I was like, well, that sucks. Like, I thought it was really awesome, but I guess it wasn't that great. And it wasn't until years later where I was like, okay, I want to take a stab at this story again, because the story had continued to evolve and play out in my life. And I took advantage of that, and I took pen to paper, and I found a publisher and just went dove head into it. So yes, writing has always been part of my life. Something that's been more prominent in my life is a storyteller, as my bio says. Like, I come to work on Monday morning and I'm like, sit your butt down. I have stories for you. And everybody's like, let me just grab my cup of coffee. Like, this is good. And, whether that was at school or at work, more often than not, like, I got to like, stop talking. I'm like, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Like, I just have to finish the story. And they're like, no. So definitely have always been a sharer, an oversharer at most parts, but it's been entertaining nonetheless. Yeah.
You say in your bio about drawing on personal experiences. Is that, care to elaborate on that?
Yeah, of course. So my first series is very much based on let's call it my 20s. Now, everybody, no matter what they go through in their 20s, whether it's they get married, they have babies, they buy their first house, whatever, or they stay single and they run through life and they rent apartments with multiple roommates, anything, whatever you go through in your 20s, there's a lot of exploration and a lot of trial and error and a lot of trying to push the boundaries of your own comfort level, because you're trying to figure out who you are as a human being. You're no longer a child. You're no longer, living under the thumb of mom and dad or your guardian, right? You're trying to figure out who you are as an adult. And so I did draw my first series, Chin Up, Tits Out, on my life at that point. And I went through wild stuff. Like, I was traveling all over the world. I dealt with long distance immigration. I dealt with racism. I dealt with abusive behaviors and mental illness. And you're trying to navigate this and you're like, this is insane. And of course, when you're going through it, you just kind of go through it. But when you look back on it, you're like, holy, like, yeah, actually you went through that. Like, you saw racism in real life. Like, I'm a white girl from Canada, so like it wasn't directed towards me, but I saw it in South Africa, and it was the opposite. Like, I'm the only white person in an airplane and getting yelled at for whatever reason, or I'm getting prohibited from going into the Canadian embassy in South Africa. And I'm just like, it was mind-boggling. Like, I had no idea this. I was naive at that point, very young and very naive, and very thinking that the world was a beautiful, glorious place, which it is. But there are dark corners in this beautiful, glorious place. And, I found a lot of them, and I'm so happy that I did, because I learned a lot. So drawing on my experiences for this first series was a huge life lesson, lessons on lessons on lessons. And on top of that, it was an opportunity for me to relate to people not only from Canada and South Africa, but people from all over the world. I mean, like, you look at Canada and we're a diverse group of human beings that come from all over. And learning about your feelings and how they manifest in certain situations, and then using that in your books to describe and sort out a feeling, it's relatable. So I was able to connect with a lot of human beings that way. And then my second series, again, I was taking personal experience from a condition that I suffer with, which is called endometriosis. It's a terrible, terrible condition. And like 1 out of 10 women actually suffer with it. And it takes like 7 years to get diagnosed. And it's extremely painful, and it's not really curable or treatable. You just kind of have a shot in the dark science experiment with your body until you find what works for you. And so when I was diagnosed with that, I was like, I'm writing about endometriosis. And so I connected with 100 women from around the world and interviewed them and talked to them and really got what their story was all about. And now I'm embarking on writing this whole new series. And I'm excited because, for me, taking things that I know and understand and I've lived through, and breaking down those scenarios and really talking about how those feelings manifest inside of us, of fear, if it's pain, if it's happiness, if it's love, if it's love towards my parents, or love towards a partner, if it's, love towards a dog. That love kind of manifests differently in all of us. And so taking these experiences and stripping them of the scenarios and really diving into the feelings that we're feeling during these certain situations is not only healing for myself, but really connecting and a full level of relatability when it comes to my readers.
Yeah. Do you ever worry that people might think that you are your main characters? Or do you
I
not
think
care
that
if they do?
no, I at first I was afraid and I was petrified. Sorry, that song just popped into my head. No. At first I was a little bit afraid for people to judge me. But then I'm like, no, if you're going to judge me in a negative way, then it just means that you have your own personal demons that you're dealing with in your own way. And that's okay. You can judge me. I'm fine with that. Now, the people that are working through their inner demons or have worked through similar demons, as soon as they hear these experiences or read these experiences and go through it with me and my characters, they're like, oh, girl, I was there once. It was interesting, it's a relatability tool, and people that are super, like, I think the first time I got a negative review, and there hasn't been too many of them, but it happens. Like, you can't please everybody.
Yeah.
I was so upset because I felt like this person had personally attacked me as a human being. And I think I cried for like 2 days. And again, this was my first book. I've written 2 more past that. So like there's a lot of growing and learning in the writing and storytelling in that time. But I was so upset because the person who wrote it was a woman, and she just tore the main character apart and was like, she's stupid, and just like used really mean words. And I'm like, holy. So when I took a step back and I was like, okay, perhaps you feel like that person angered you in a really bad way, and that's okay. Like, at least I evoked some sort of emotion from you with my words. Like, I never had to meet you. I never had to shake your hand. I never had to hang out with you in the same room. But the fact that you felt it necessary to use that much oomph in a review means that I did something right. And so I kind of took it at that, and that face value is that I evoked emotion with just simply my words. And as a writer, I think that's what you want to do, is you want to evoke emotion with your words, whether you're writing a horror or a murder mystery or something, suspense thriller. You're not asking your reader to love your story. You're hoping your reader feels that terror and that angst and that anxiety within them as they're reading the pages. Yes, I write contemporary chick lit, so it could be confused with warm and fuzzy and romance and this and that. And of course there is, but there's still going to be points in the novel and points in the story that aren't fuzzy and aren't chocolate covered rainbows and butterflies and unicorns. And that's the cool thing about contemporary, is that you can kind of mishmash a little bit of everything in there.
Yeah, I think we wouldn't be doing our jobs as writers if we didn't touch on the darker feelings. That's, it's what we're here for, really. At the end of the day.
Exactly. It's that relatability. And, you ask authors who do write those darker genres, is like, is there a little bit of you in it? And they go, yeah, of course. Like, if I'm mad, I'm going and killing somebody in a book versus going to act that out in real life. And I don't have to go to jail. And I'm like, I never really thought about it that way. Like, it's so funny to think about how people release their stress, or how authors release their stress in life within the writing. I take on certain situations in my life and I put it out on paperwork, raw and honest. And then of course, like, refine it with my editing team. But, like, I do that. Where other people are like, no, I'm going to make some like dragon demon person and they're going to go on a killing rampage and that's going to make me feel better. I'm like, oh, all right. Like, I can't even honk my horn at somebody if they cut me off. I'm like, no. Like, it all depends on who we are as a human and what works for us. And so it's really cool to kind of see how different authors take their emotion and put it onto paper when it comes to their story, because everybody goes about it a little differently.
Yeah. So is writing a form of catharsis for you?
Oh yeah, totally. Like, I have to be in the right mind frame. Like say this weekend, I wanted to write, but I have a little bit of like this head sinus thing that's going on. And I'm like, am I in the mood to? And the answer was no, I wasn't in the mood to. I really wanted to, but it was like an empty vastness inside. I'm like, I can't write when I'm empty about, like, especially when I'm writing about something I'm passionate about. Where the previous weekend, I was totally fine. And I'm like, this is so exciting. I'm going to write. And I ended up writing for like 5 hours straight. Like I had my earphones in and music playing, and I had a really big cup of coffee and a glass of water. And of course I peed like 16 times, but like who's counting? And I just like hammered on the keyboard, and my partner works overnight on the weekend. So he woke up at the end of the 5 hours and was like, all I heard was like you hammering on this keyboard. He's just like, do your keys still have life left in them? And I'm like, no, I'm good. Everything's fine. Good thing it's a computer. It's an inanimate object. But I just felt I woke up feeling like I wanted to do it. And I poured everything out onto the pages that I wrote that day. And then after that, I was like, I think I need a nap. And I had a shower and I napped for like 2 hours. It was absolutely great. I felt fantastic. And I liken it to like a good workout, like a good whatever, however you work out, you feel great after that. But I have learned over time that if I don't feel good going into it, unlike a workout, if I work out and I don't feel good going into it, I know I'm going to feel better afterwards. If I go into writing not feeling good, I tend to feel even worse afterwards because I'm already empty inside. So let's not drain me out even further. Where working out kind of just simply uplifts you in some way, shape, or form. So you just got to sweat out the cold. So maybe I should have gone for a walk yesterday instead of just sleep. But hey, I feel way better today than I did yesterday. So we're working in the right direction.
Yeah. So what kind of things do you do to refill yourself and stop feeling so empty?
Well, I would like to say workout. Workout is definitely something that it has always been. Like I told you, I was very active as a kid, so into a lot of sports, and you don't really realize as a kid or as a teenager how much adrenaline and endorphins and dopamine comes from kind of getting a good sweat on. So in my later 20s, I realized how much that helps. And of course, with endometriosis, my workouts have changed. Like I used to run marathons and lift weights, and people are like, oh, are you training for a body competition? I'm like, no, I'm training so I can eat whatever the heck I want to eat without any like remorse. And they're like, oh, good for you. And I'm like, yeah, good for me. Like I'm going to go and eat like a whole roll of brownies after this. They're healthy brownies. They're made with black beans, but like, so I'm going to eat a whole row of them, like, and shamelessly. And it definitely helps rejuvenate. Now, also putting something on is getting your setting right. Like, I know some people can just write wherever, and that's totally cool. I'm very much a setting person. Like I need to tune out the whole world. And now, does that mean like I can't go to Starbucks and write for 4 hours pre-COVID because you can't go do that now? But like, of course I could. But do I prefer to write in my own environment, like with no pants on and like good music and a glass of wine close to me? Like, yeah, I would much prefer that than like driving to a Starbucks and having to refill that $5 cup of coffee every few hours, and I hope nobody touches my computer when I go to the bathroom 20 times. And, so I like to be in a very perfect setting, if that makes sense. Like nobody can talk to me. I remember, actually, this is a funny story. So when I was writing my third book, I was writing, it was a heavy part of my third book. And I was writing, my friend and I was traveling actually. So I was staying in a hotel, and he actually lived in the city. So in the city that I was traveling to. So I was like, hey, I'm writing tonight. I don't feel like being alone in my hotel room for like 16 hours. But I also don't really want to talk to you. Like, do you want to just be here? And he's like, yeah, I actually have some music to mix. So he was a DJ on the side of his corporate job. And like I work corporate and I'm a writer on the side of my corporate job. And so he's like, yeah, I'll play around with my music and you do your writing. And I'm like, great, I'll bring dinner. You bring the wine. Like we're good. And he's like, yeah, let's do this. So I looked at him before we started and I said, if I get emotional, do not interrupt me. Don't ask me if I'm okay. Don't elbow me. Just let me be. Mm-hmm. And he goes, yeah, that's totally fine. Like totally fine. So we're sitting next to each other because like you don't want to look at each other face to face and not talk. That's awkward. So sitting next to each other so you actually don't have to look eye to eye. And we start with full glasses of wine. And then all of a sudden I'm sobbing, like full tears coming out of the face, like trying to hold it back. And all he does is he grabs the bottle of wine and he kind of shakes it in my peripherals in the front. And so like I grab my wine glass and I like move it towards him and he pours it. And then he puts the bottle of wine down and he continues what he's doing. And at the end of our session, like creative session together, he's just like, was that okay? I'm like, it was perfect. Like, cause I would have done the same thing myself, but the wine was closer to you. I didn't want to have to ask for it. So I'm like, you kind of just read my mind. And he's just like, awesome. I'm like, yeah, thanks, bro. Like really appreciate that. And, yeah, so we had a really good laugh about that, but I'm like, I told him, I was bawling and he just champed it out. I'm like, I don't know how awkward that would have been for him, but he champed it out and he totally just did what he needed to do and did exactly what I needed in that moment. And it was very, very appreciative. I was very appreciative of that. Like, holy.
Yeah. I think having the right people around you is so important. Do you feel you have supportive people in your life?
Oh, goodness, yes. I am beyond blessed with supportive people. If not too many cooks in the kitchen at some points. My partner is absolutely brilliant when it comes to supporting me and my staff. After he hears me on an interview, he goes, girl, you need your own talk show. Like, move aside, Oprah. I'm like, can you calm down? And he goes, no. And I'm like, okay, this is why I love you. Or when I was doing the 100 interviews for my next book series, I would always start off the same way. I'm like, hi, you don't know me, so let me tell you a little bit about myself. So I would go into a little bit about my Up Tits Out series. I'd go into about my corporate job. I'd go into about it with my endometriosis story. And on Saturdays and Sundays, I would do up to 5 interviews. So 10 interviews in 2 days. And at the end of it, he'd be like, oh, let me see how good I can do this spiel. And so he would start to mimic me on how I did my spiel. And he's just like, I can do it backwards, upside down, sideways. He's just like, you say the same thing over and over and over and over again. He's like, I love you. But he's like, I cannot wait till you are done this 100 interviews. Like, are you close yet? And I'm like, yeah, I'm 50 into it. And he goes, great. And then when we got to like the 80s, 90s, and he was just like, it's so much closer. And our basement in our house is unfinished. So it's like, he has to like behind, we have a working space in our living room. So it's like working space, couch, TV. So I would have a virtual background on so the people behind me couldn't watch the football or the soccer that he was watching or see him in his house coat. It would just be the virtual background. And he'd be like, oh, thanks so much. Like, I appreciate that. I'm like, no, like, it's fine. We're working off of headphones here. Like, no big deal, And, but he's extremely supportive. And, my parents, my family has been absolutely hands down supportive. My first series, I wrote a lot about my family, and the struggles that we went through together. I even wrote about my brother being gay. Like, I had to ask him for his permission. I'm like, it's not my story, but I definitely think it's integral and it could be part of a moving, relatable piece of having a sibling that is struggling with their identity. And I said, do I have your permission to write about your coming out story? And he goes, yeah, but like, I got to read it first. And I'm like, okay, so, you write it from your perspective. And he goes, I didn't realize that's the way that you saw it. And I'm like, yeah, but that's how it happened to me. It happened to you differently, but it affected everybody that was involved differently. And I was like, now you know my perspective. And he's like, but I look like such a jerk. I'm like, but you don't. Like, I don't see it that way. And I was like, you see it that way because it's from a different perspective. I was like, but from somebody who's reading it that's outside of the circle, outside of you and I, aren't going to see it that way. You're just in your feelings about it. And I said, are you okay? Because I'm like, I can change this. And he goes, no, like, what you're saying is making sense. I'm just still a little bit insecure about it. But he's like, you've written about some of your biggest mistakes and shared them with the world, and nothing really bad has happened with you. So like, I'm just the brother of an author. Like, nobody gives a crap about me. So I was like, all right, that's awesome. And so it's worked out that I've had the opportunity to take some pretty heavy stuff that my family has gone through together and write about it and share it, obviously with permission. But yeah, it's pretty cool that I have such a family that is open and supportive. And, a lot of the times when I do share a story with somebody that I've just met and they do go ahead and they read my books, they're like, can I get adopted by your parents? I'm like, you're 40. And they're like, I don't care. Can I just like be part of your family? I'm like, of course, we take them all in from all over. Like, let's make Christmas even more crazy. Let's do this. So, yeah, my parents have pretty much gotten like rave reviews from the first book all the way through. And I think even they've gotten Facebook messages from some readers. Like, my dad's like, who's this person from like Perth? I was like, I don't know anybody in Australia. I'm like, oh, she's a reader. She really just loved you guys. So she's now friends on Facebook with you. And he's like, I don't post anything. I'm like, it's okay. Just, let's just love them. And he goes, okay, dear. Okay. Yeah. It's quite entertaining. My family is very, very supportive. I mean, even my coworkers at my job, like the only rule is do not let this interrupt your day job. Like that's the only rule. You got to get your work done, which is respectful. All right, cool. Let's do this. But have fun. Go do your creative self. Like that's fine. My corporate job is very structured, very organized corporate writing. So my creative writing on my book piece and on my side is my side hustle is it feeds the other side of my brain, which brings me more balance in life.
Yeah. Are you working from home under the current circumstances?
Yeah, I've been home for about a year. And previously to that, with my endometriosis, I was home part-time, like 1 to 2 times a week for almost 2 years. So like I've been working from home for 3 years almost. And my parents have always worked from home. They own their own business for longer than I've been around. So working from home and differentiating home from work. And even though, yes, I have a workspace in my living room that's attached to my kitchen because it's all one big room. It doesn't bug me. Like I'm able to separate that time because I grew up in that environment and I love it because if I have some time in between meetings or I need that 10-minute break, which everybody does every now and then, I get to go do something that's productive in my house. I'll unload the dishwasher. I'll put a load of laundry on. I'll sweep. I'll, go shovel the driveway in minus a bajillion right now. And, like it, instead of go bug a coworker because I need a 10-minute break. I'm going to go find somebody who looks like they're not that busy and be like, hey, so I need a break. I need to like stretch my legs and give my brain a break. And then you're interrupting their productivity. And so it gives me a real lovely opportunity to find total, like more overall life balance, that I'm not too tired by the end of the day or by the weekend, and all my chores are done by all that time too.
And do you carve out specific time for writing around your corporate job?
Oh yeah. Like if you look at my calendar, it is spaced, blocked out. I've never met anybody who uses a calendar more than I do. My Alexa's like, you have 17 events tomorrow. I'm like, oh, that's great. And it's like, okay, you got your podcast. So it's like, you got to get out of bed at this time. You got to be putting your makeup on or getting your hair done or getting into the shower at this time. Like I am very A-type personality like that. So it's, I have a chiropractor appointment this evening. So it's like, my schedule tells me when I'm supposed to leave and actually what time my appointment is. So I have that commute time. And are there days where I cut out time for writing and I don't end up doing it? Heck yes. Like there are times where I'm like, I am sorry, I am brain spent. My day at work was a little bit more full or crazy than I anticipated it to be. And I used all my energy. And again, like as we spoke earlier, I'm not one to continue to drain my pot dry especially when it comes to my writing, because I've learned that my writing just it's like superficial at that point. It just means like I'm writing because I'm writing. I'm not actually writing because I feel whatever the character's feeling and feel the story at that time. And for me to really want to evoke emotion, I gotta be in the whole mind, body, soul experience space to be able to do that properly.
Yeah. Do you have aspirations to go full time with your writing and give up the corporate thing?
I think possibly yes at some point, but I mean, I don't know how, like, I don't have enough in my brain to do a full-time, pump out like 10, 15 books a year, or how many ever books a year it's going to take to sustain a full-time income. I also co-host on a podcast. I write for a literary magazine. So like I dabble into other things as well. And so I think at some point there will be a time for me to leave the corporate and really go 100% on my own. But is that next year, 5 years from now? Like, I don't know. I don't see an end for it. I really love my corporate job. Like, I really, really do. It's absolutely fantastic. My team is fantastic. My supervisor is fantastic. The benefits are great. And with my endometriosis, like those benefits are really needed for acupuncture and massage and all the extra holistic stuff that I kind of need to maintain balance within my body, which I would lose if I go out on my own. Or at least it would cost me more to obtain that care, to sustain this type of level of care. So it would need to be the right time and the right move. And so I'm like, you know what, I'm okay building both kind of careers simultaneously right now, build one a little bit faster than the other. And then eventually it will switch. And whenever that happens, that's going to happen. But it is what it is. I don't foresee it happening anytime soon, just because like I said, I really enjoy my job. I love going to work, which is my office 10 feet away from my bedroom. But I really enjoy going to work every day. And as long as it stays that way, then I'll continue to work in the environment. Because, I mean, if you're continuing to grow and you enjoy it, then why stop it is my question. Yeah.
So you mentioned your podcast there. I had a little listen, sort you out. Really enjoyed it. Tell us a little about how that came about, because you podcast with a partner as well, don't you?
Yeah, I do actually. So our podcast is called Quill and Ink, a podcast for book lovers. So we interview authors from all over the place, and we we split it. My co-host is another author, Jenna Green. She's from the west side of Canada. I'm from the central part of Canada. We've never met in person. And we're sponsored by Creative Edge, which is our publicist, or our publicist, Mickey Mickelson. He kind of voluntold us, was like, girls, meet each other, do a podcast together. And we're like, hi, nice to meet you. Like, where are you from? Like, not knowing anything about each other and not knowing anything about being a podcast host, only being on podcasts ourselves as authors. And we just kind of dove headfirst into it just over a year ago, actually. And oh my goodness gracious, it has been another wild ride. Like, we have learned so much. We've done just over 40 interviews over the last year, and we're booked like 3 months in advance now. And it's like, it's mind boggling really on how it's progressed and how you learn not only as an author, but as an interviewer and as an interviewee when you're a podcast host, and you learn so much about writing. We split the show in two. So I take the first half, she takes the second half in asking questions. And I try to make that person that we're interviewing relatable to our listeners and our watchers and our readers. I'm all about how the mind works and what these people do outside of writing, because I think that's equally as important as what you do and how you do write, because they feed off of one another. And so when this all transpires, you know, you're picking this person's brain about like what they do with their family, or you know what kind of mental illness they've talked about. And mental illness once, I'm picking their brain about mental illness, and then Jenna, she goes into like how you build characters and how you build, successful series, and what the plot is on their next book release, and we have these really great, laid back, fun conversations, and you learn. Like, we just did an anniversary episode, just the two of us on Facebook last week actually, and we were like, okay, so like, what have we learned? And I'm like, man, like, I have become a better interviewee because I've had people answer questions well, and I've also had people answer questions not well, and then you're like, I just went through like 6 questions in 6 minutes, and we have like 25 minutes left. Like, oh my God, like, what are we going to talk about now? And then you pick up like the most random topic, like the one word they said that you can relate to. You pick it up and you start talking about that, and you're like, okay, I'm talking about cats or dogs or snowmobiles for 20 minutes. And you're like, this is not what you set out to do, but it's what happened. And so, you very much learn, and even like taking on lessons for my second book series, how to build my character profiles and the approach that I'm taking on my second series versus my first series. All of those lessons I've learned from interviews, all of them. And so to me, that's like the most important, like, awesome thing. So I'm very happy. Yeah, it's been not only a wild ride, but like the lessons and the people, the contacts that I've made. And I'm like, yeah, this person, we're friends. That woman that you can buy in like Walmart, or, that very famous author, like, we know each other, like, we got connections. You just feel so honored. Like, even Mickey, our publicist, is like, how do you stay calm? Like, we did an interview with an artist. Her name is Melanie, and she played at Woodstock, which was like one of the most influential music festivals of the 60s. She was one of 3 female solo artists that played that weekend. So like, iconic woman, and full of spunk and zest for life, and we're talking and we're live, and Mickey was watching and he's in tears because it's just like it's his idol from his childhood. And he's like, how do you stay calm in a situation like that? And I'm like, well, first of all, you're on camera, you're not in like, you know, real life, so there's that aspect to things that you're starstruck, but you're not that starstruck. And I was like, but at the same time, it's like, you have scripts, you have questions, like you stick to it, and you don't tangent off of it too far. Like, because once you tangent off of it too far, like I remember Jen and I sitting there, we were like, and the woman was singing for us, and I was just like, oh my God. Jen is typing to me, she's like, your eyes are gonna pop out of your head. I'm like, I know, but like, holy crap, like this is so surreal that we have like one of the most iconic singers from the 60s and 70s singing on our podcast right now. Like this is something that I would have never, like, you asked me a year ago, you asked me 6 months ago, would this happen? And I would have been like, what are you talking about? But it happened. You know, when that happens, you have these opportunities for it to happen more and more with other guests and other, you know, creators and artists out there. And if it happens with one, then it can happen with them all. And to me, that's the coolest aspect, is that, you know, we have these opportunities with people that have written one book, people that have written 50 books, people that have been an iconic music legend for 50 years, to people that have produced and created, you know, their first song. And it's like, this is cool to be part of this. And I think we do have COVID to thank for this. One good positive thing is that, you know, COVID has really put the world into a digital and virtual aspect, right? And so it gives us the opportunity to connect with people that might be a little bit too busy because COVID wasn't around. They would be traveling all over the place. Now they're stuck at home. So like, why not talk to us?
Yeah, I mean, so much has, obviously it was a very virtual digital world already, but, you know, it's become so much more so, like with, you know, like you said about events, with so many writing events and conferences all going online. And I've been involved in running one myself, which was crazy. But, you know, like I wouldn't be able to ordinarily go to an event in Canada, but now I could buy a virtual ticket and be there and meet a whole different group of people. So.
It is fantastic. Like, don't get me wrong. Like, I definitely got the opportunity to go down to the States to do a book event, and I felt super like bougie and kind of like badass. You know, you're sitting there, you're like, I'm getting paid to do a book thing, and you like hair flip, and like customs is like, so what are you doing in the States for 24 hours? I'm like, I'm working. What are you doing? You know, like I felt super cool. Even though I traveled for 40 hours there and back for literally 1 hour's worth of work. And I was exhausted. Like it was so draining, like 6 airports, 7 hours of driving all by myself. And because, you know, I'm obviously not cool enough to have like a bodyguard or anything like a publicist come with me, right? So it's like you're doing this all by yourself, which is totally fine. I'm independent. I love airports for some reason. I don't know why. It feels like I'm on a vacation as soon as I step into one, even if I'm going for work. So it was exhausting. It was so much fun. But now it's like I get to talk to somebody like you overseas. I get to talk to people all over the world, especially all these interviews that I've done with these women. It's like I've hit 21 different countries this year. Well, in 2020, I hit 21 different countries without having to ever really leave the comfort of my own home. Sometimes not even leaving the comfort of my own bed. Like... You're like, I'm sorry, it's 10 o'clock in the morning and I'm still in a house coat. And, you know, somebody in the UK that's like, it's 4 o'clock in the afternoon and I'm still in my pajamas. Like, no big deal. Like, yes.
I think it highlights how, like, because you were saying about getting starstruck and stuff. And I was thinking, you know, I've definitely experienced that. But at the same time, through experience, you come to just realize we're all just people. And
Yes.
and actually how humble most people are as well.
You're totally right. Like, we are just people. And there's two reasons. And one of the reasons why I like to say this is that's exactly why I do what I do at the beginning of our podcast. I want to make these stars just like regular people, because then people are more susceptible to listen and to absorb what they have to say versus being completely starstruck. Like, if you do hear about somebody's lavish travels and this and that, what really pops into our mind and stays in our mind is, man, like, I want a private jet to a private island, to a yacht, to a this, to a that, versus what does this person really have to say? And are they saying stuff that I can learn from or relate to? And a lot of our authors do have things that either regular people that aren't writers, but perhaps just like reading, can learn from, or other writers who are aspiring and growing their own businesses can learn from. Like, as a podcast host, I'm learning from these people because I've now made them relatable. I'm like, oh, you like to take a hike in the forest with your kids and like pop a squat if you can't find a bathroom? Sweet. I've definitely done that before, and it's like, now this person and I are relatable because we've both peed in the bush. Great. That's great. So anything that they have to say, I'm more susceptible to hearing.
Yeah.
But if they're going on yachts and private jets and buying $5,000 shoes, the only thing I'm thinking about is, man, I'm putting myself in that dream. I'm not necessarily listening to the meat and potatoes of their life lessons or their relatability, or whatever they can say that I can absorb and learn from. I'm just in this cloud nine because of what, how they've gone about it. So there's that aspect. And then being on the other side of the starstruck, it's fantastic. I've picked up a couple of phone calls with the interviews, and I'm like, okay, well, let me tell you a little bit about myself, getting ready for that spiel. And and I have these women going, oh, no, I know all about you already. And I'm like, but how? They're like, well, we've read all your books, and, we're friends on Facebook, we're friends on Instagram, we're friends on Twitter. Like, I pretty much know everything about you. Like, so like, how's your dog, Madison? And I'm like, what? And it catches me so off guard. And I'm like, okay, but let me make myself a little bit more relatable. Like, look at me, I'm in a house coat right now. And, like, you're trying to, and to find that relatability. Like, I'm not different than you are. You may be a detective or a nutritionist or a clerk in a store, whatever you are. Like, we're still on the same playing field. Like, just because I did this doesn't mean you're less than me, because you've done a whole bunch of other cool things in your life.
Yeah.
So yeah, it happens on both senses. I'm like, I need to be relatable with everybody I'm talking to, whether I'm a host or whether I'm an interviewee. And I just want to find that relatability. So whatever I have to say or whatever I have to try to absorb is the stuff that I'm striving to learn to grow internally.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So I have a sort of final question we ask all of our guests on the Great Writers Share, which is, Miranda Oh, why do you write?
I write to relate. I was gonna say share, but no, it's to relate. My first book was heavy stuff, and I wanted to relate to people that going through heavy stuff doesn't mean that you're going through it alone. And my second series is all about giving women who have felt silenced for years, decades, giving them a voice, going, hey, it's okay to go through this stuff. It's okay to be told no, but don't stop fighting for yourself. And you're not alone in this journey. And so writing for me has been not only a healing tool for my own individual self, but it has been a source of connectivity, relatability, and healing for my readers as well. And I just wish to continue to strive to produce stuff that impacts you in your soul and your gut every single time you pick up a book of mine.
Oh, lovely. Now then, we do also have the slightly evil rapid fire round.
That's all
10
right.
questions, as quick as you can.
Okay.
You will be timed. No, I'm kidding. So, are you ready?
Yes.
Okay. Slippers or fluffy socks?
Ooh, slippers.
Favorite season?
Summer.
Last song you sang along to?
Sir Mix-a-Lot, I like big butts.
Favorite wine?
Ooh, Old Vine Zinfandel.
Mm-hmm. Candles or fairy lights?
Candles.
The next place you want to travel to?
Anywhere hot.
Your favorite shoes?
Ooh, black stilettos.
The last book that made you laugh?
My own.
Nice. Your ideal date night?
Ooh, that's a good one. Somewhere where we can eat and share good food and good company. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I like good food and good company.
Okay.
Combined. Mm-hmm.
And a genre you've never read?
Murder mystery.
Ooh.
Yeah.
Yeah. Nice.
I've read like horrors and thrillers and dramas and this and that, but not historical time. Like I've read a lot, but I've not read a murder mystery, I don't think. So
there you go.
Yeah.
That's 10 questions.
That was pretty quick.
So thank you so much for joining me. It's been an absolute pleasure talking to you.
Pleasure is all mine. Thank you so much, Holly.
Thank you. Thanks for listening to this episode of the Great Writers Share podcast. Tune in next week to listen to Dan's interview with Jennifer Ann Gordon. Until next time.